Our public hearing on House Bill 1041. We will move directly to House Bill 1016, and Edie has the staff report on this as well.
House Bill 1016 relates to firearm silencers, and under current Washington law, we do not regulate the possession of silencers. However, it is a gross misdemeanor crime for any person to use any device or contrivance for suppressing the noise of any firearm. Federal law, however, does regulate the possession of firearm silencers and mufflers under the National Firearms Act. And under that act, a person who wants to acquire a silencer or muffler would have to go through a number of steps, and that includes filing an application with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. That includes a certification from the local chief law enforcement officer in the jurisdiction, and that also the person would have to undergo a background check, get approval for the transfer of the suppressor, and then pay a $200 tax on the transfer. So House Bill 1016 amends our statute that makes it a crime to use a suppressor to accept out the use of a suppressor when when it's legally registered and possessed under the requirements of federal law.
Okay, do we have any questions for staff? Gentleman from the 19th District has arrived. Representative Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. This is, I think, a fairly simple bill. As you heard, you can own a noise suppressor in this state. You just can't use it, and I think that's something that we can fix here. I think it's something we should fix. These are highly regulated at the federal level. You must register them and pay a $200 tax. And if they're transferred, they must legally be transferred, and then the tax paid again. And I think this is a hearing conservation issue, as somebody that you all serve with me. So I think you've come to understand that I say "huh" a lot and have suffered some noise damage. But these are not the classic. You can't silence a firearm. You can reduce the noise, and that's what these products do, and I think they should be lawfully used. I think you'll hear a lot of support behind me in testimony for this bill, and I think this is a real candidate for the suspension calendar.
Presumption.
Thank you for that lobbying. Do we have any questions for the prime sponsor, Representative Clifford?
Will there be more testimony? I can hold my question if there will be more testimony.
We have lots of people signed in,
Mr. Chair,
all pro.
We have a dozen people who have signed in here. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Who do you anticipate using this in what circumstances?
Oh, I think this will be used a lot on shooting ranges. As many of you know, I'm a firearms enthusiast, but they're noisy. And anything we can do to help reduce that noise and conflicts, I think is helpful. One of my friends is a banker on the harbor, and I think he intends to be here today. I haven't seen him yet, but you know, he just wants to reduce noise on his firearms, and I think I'm coming to understand that even law enforcement is not allowed to utilize these devices, and so I think that there may be a need in law enforcement where they may want to actually suppress noise. So,
Representative Frocht.
Just briefly, Representative Blake, could you just clarify, or a point of clarification? Under current federal law, the use of a suppressor is not a violation of federal law. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
As long as it's properly permitted.
Right, as long as it's properly permitted. So.
Yeah. You know, country folks, sometimes we might have stuck a pop bottle on the end of a 22 or something, but, you know, you didn't hear me say that.
Seems like that would increase noise.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Representative Blake.
Thank you.
Vice Chair.
Mr. Chair, as I said, there are a dozen people who have signed in, 5 of whom wish to testify. They're all in favor. So I will call each of you up who have requested to testify. Mr. Gidding, Randall Bragg, Brian Schilt, Tom Limon, and Brian Wirtz. Perhaps Brian Wirtz, you could begin. And if you have, thanks very much to each of you for braving the elements to come here, but bear in mind we have a lot of testimony, so try not to repeat each other and try to be brief. Yeah, if you could start.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Brian Wirtz. I'm with Walk Ops on the executive board. I'm also the president of the Lakewood Police Independent Guild. I wanted to go over a couple points of this. We would have brought this bill forward last year had we not had quite a few other priorities kind of take precedence over it. We've already talked about hearing loss, and this is one of the big issues that that we're dealing with. And it was even said in the beginning the silencers, and that's just a Hollywood thing. They're not silencers. One of the best cans out there, the suppressors, get you down 40 decibels. So you're shooting a rifle that's 150, 160 decibels. You still absolutely need hearing protection, but it takes a massive amount of the noise out of it. I run a shooting range. I'm the range master for the police department. I spend $250,000 in acoustic materials that have to be replaced constantly to get my officers trained because of the noise that goes on in that range. We're wearing double hearing protection. So when I call cease fire, there's an emergency on the range. My bigger problem is they can't hear me do that because we have so much hearing protection just to get to a manageable level. If you have an ambulance go by you, if you have a jackhammer, those are 140, 150, 160 decibels. So that's what one of these normal rifles is going to sound like. And again, this only goes down maybe about 30, 40, some of them 10 decibels. On the outside shooting ranges in law enforcement, we have the Pierce County Sheriff's Department. We can't shoot after 4:30 anymore, so we can't train at night. 75% of all police officer-involved shootings are at night in reduced conditions, and we can't train for it. So they have to find indoor ranges. Indoor ranges, mine was $750,000, and I had a full head of hair before I designed and built that range between OSHA, WISHA, and everything else. So we would love to be able to use our facilities at night, but people like to build houses next to ranges and then start complaining about the noise next to the ranges. So in the urban areas, this is a big deal. I have acreage out in Moses Lake. If I shoot my rifle out there, just target shooting, neighbors miles away with no trees are hearing my shots go off, and I'd like to not have that happen anymore. Somebody said put a can on the tip of a barrel, and I think I think folks might be worried that you're going to have folks out there, killers out there, and they're going to put these suppressors on. They're just going to start, sniping people, and that it just doesn't make a lot of sense because for right now, for 25 cents or 50 cents, you can put a 2-liter bottle, some cotton, and some duct tape on the end of your rifle, do a much better job suppressing it than you can with a legal suppressor, and get the job done. Now, if you Google that, I don't know if the feds are going to be watching you, but it's very easy to do. And so that's already done. On the other side of that, when you put one of these on a rifle, you're talking almost 5 feet in length overall. This is not something that you're going to want to do if you're out there for illegal reasons to put that on, unless you have one large trench coat. On a pistol, you're almost doubling how long it is. So these aren't something you want to put it on there. And if there's a cool factor, it's gone after one shot because it doesn't go down very much, and they're very expensive. So on a couple of those quick issues, we're in a tax revenue problem. These things are generally about $1,000 for a good one, and you're going to get sales tax on a $1,000 piece of equipment for everybody out there shooting them at these ranges. On the law enforcement side, I'm on the meth lab team. I cover 5 counties, but we're not allowed to use them. Now, if I go into a meth lab and I have to get in a shooting, one of our biggest problems there is I could blow the place up because of the flame that comes out of the barrel of my rifle. But we have no exemption to actually put these on and use them. That's a bad environment, and that's a very realistic scenario if we have to go in and we shoot in an active cooking meth lab with that IDLH environment with those gases going on. I could go over a lot of pros on the law enforcement side, but I wanted to make sure we didn't support this as a law enforcement only bill because I think this is the right of any citizen to go through this process, pay their federal tax, go through a much more extensive process than you would just to buy a gun. And it takes 90 to 120 days with the ATF. You don't have to do that even for a pistol over the counter. And not every dealer can sell these. You have to be a Class 3 or better. So for those reasons, Walk Ops, Lakewood Police Independent Guild, and I know most of the cops I know are supporting this. And I will just say that this is going to cost me more work if this passes, because the chief is not going to be the guy signing this off. He's going to call me as the range guy and say, hey, this guy's applying for one of these things and do your thing. And I'm going to have dozens and dozens of these things probably to on my desk that I'll have to deal with, and I'm more than happy to do that because it's a common sense kind of issue for me. 38 states allow the purchase, only one, and we're one of those 38. We're the only state that doesn't allow the actual use. So I think this is a cleanup issue, and we support it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Questions?
Thanks, Brian. Remember, if you could possibly be maybe 60 seconds of comments here, so we don't have a lot of time. I'm sorry.
Hello, my name is Randall Braggy. I represent myself and several other people that would like to use their legally owned suppressors. A previous person covered just about everything I wanted to say. I can add that the federal penalties for misuse of a silencer or simply evading the tax are very severe. It's possible to spend 10 years in prison or get a $10,000 fine just for making or buying a silencer without ATF authorization, and misuse of one involving a violent crime could lead to life in prison. So people out there that own them and own them legally are usually very well aware of these facts and are unlikely to commit any crimes with them. And I can also add that Ceasefire Washington has agreed to take a neutral position on this bill, and so has the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Roberts has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Several of you have made reference to some homemade versions that don't sound necessarily safe or anything that we would want to encourage. So is the reading of this bill that we are only allowing some kind of certified or?
Yes, the only silencers that can be legally owned in the entire country by anyone, police and military included, are those that are authorized by the ATF.
Okay, thank you.
Please proceed.
I'm Brian Schilt, Tenino resident. I'm here representing myself, several other individuals, and 2 Class 3 FFL dealers who couldn't make it today. I appreciate the committee's time taking this seriously. This is a simple bill revision that merely adds verbiage to the statute that allows people who legally possess them to use them as they should be used. It will not make it any easier for individuals to obtain them. As previously stated, they are extremely difficult to get. One took me 9 months to receive. And that was after, paying a $200 tax fee and paying $700 to receive it in advance. So I myself own several registered legally obtained noise suppression devices and currently can only use them in other states. Last year on a hunting trip to Oregon, I was able to take advantage of one of these devices, and it was wonderful not to have any temporary or permanent hearing loss after the trip. It was even easier to converse with individuals on the way home from that trip. That benefit was not only affected by the hunting party, but also by nearby landowners who didn't have to hear the repeated shots. I trust the committee here will take the appropriate action followed by the legislature in a whole and move this on. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Representative Clifford has a question.
Go ahead. I just going
sorry.
to ask
Yes.
our law enforcement officer if he could position himself. I have one last question for the law enforcement officer when all testimony is done.
While he's coming,
15 seconds.
please introduce yourself briefly.
My name is Tom Limon. I represent some manufacturers who are licensed to manufacture noise suppression devices in the state. Due to the current legal situation, we are not allowed to conduct research and development within the state boundaries. You won't find, as such, you won't find any military unit or any SWAT teams or police who use silencers made in Washington State. We can't compete with out-of-state companies because it's cumbersome and legally sticky to conduct research and development. I support this bill because it would level the playing field with businesses in other states. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Clifford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly, I was hoping this might come out in testimony, so I held it to the end. In your professional experience and your years of experience as a law enforcement officer, if this bill passes, do you think that criminals, if it doesn't pass, do you think criminals who would use this for illegal means would still have the opportunity to do so? Would this
For 25-cent soda can, you're right. I think that's exactly what they'll continue to do. But I've never heard of any documented case where they've even done that.
To my understanding, this bill is designed to help law-abiding citizens use these suppressors.
That's correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And do we have one further witness? Yeah, I think we have, Roger.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, please come forward.
Thank you.
My name is Art Giddings. I am an NFA firearms owner. My last transfer took 10 months. The Form 4, which is required, is in duplicate with duplicate fingerprint cards and photographs. Every time it transfers, it has to transfer the same way. You need a CLEO sign-off, a Chief Law Enforcement Officer sign-off, and then it has to go back to ATF. ATF has hired, in my understanding, over 100 new examiners to take care of this type of transaction for the rest of the country. I currently have to go to Nevada, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, etc. to use items that I legally own. I've had to talk to my sheriff. They've had to do forms, round and round and round to do this. This is not an easy item to possess. Please change the law. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks very
I
much.
think that'll conclude our public hearing on House Bill 1016. We'll move directly to House Bill 1017,